Hey guys, I'm Nick and he's Joe. We're the hosts of the Combat Zone. This is the show where the enemy has only three things to say: abandon ship, bail out, or take cover.
Okay, that's pretty hot there, Nick.
I liked it.
No, I meant the shouting.
Oh, well, hey, I'm excited. It's great. We have a lot of fun with this show.
Welcome to the Combat Zone podcast, ladies and gentlemen. And, as he said, I'm Joe and he's Nick.
Yeah.
And we're co-hosts. And we like the term co-host because we believe in equal pay for work of equal value. But we're not getting paid, so let's call it equal credit for work of equal value.
But hopefully that'll change someday in the future. All right. I thought we'd dive right in, Joe. First of all, let's deal with what happened in Toronto. Let's start with that. There's a ton been said about the attack in Toronto by the guy with the van. And to tell you the truth, I'm not really sure what to make of it. I mean, I know what happened. We all know what happened. We even know who did it. It's alleged at this point because of the legality of the way our legal system works, but there's no doubt about who did it. They got the guy, that constable who arrested him. We can talk about him, too, a little bit later if you want to. I thought it was an incredible piece of police work to take him alive. But that said, the whole thing, when I first heard about this sounded just like a terror attack out of Europe. So the first thing you think of is radical Islamic terrorism.
That's what I thought when I first heard about the incident.
Mm-hmm.
This fellow driving a van up on the sidewalk, he hit, I think it's 16 or 17 people. Mm-hmm. As of the taping of this particular podcast, 10 people now have died. I thought for sure terrorist. And in a sense, it is an act of terrorism.
Oh, no question.
But it isn't Islamic terrorism, apparently. You're talking about how he's the alleged perpetrator. And that's always been an oddity to me because there's no question that he actually did it.
Yeah, well.
So, let's drop the alleged. This guy, he's guilty. Whether or not he's guilty in the legal sense, we'll have to see. But this is the fellow. He rented a van, got behind the wheel, drove it down Yonge Street in Toronto, pulled up on the sidewalk, and ran people down. So, yeah, there's no allegation that that's what he did. That's for sure what he did.
Well, they certainly caught him at the end of it, and they know he was the guy that got out of the van, so it's not like it was a big mystery.
Right. Is this a harbinger of things to come? In other words, we know that terrorists have been using this kind of attack lately. You mentioned that in Europe there was a large one in Nice.
That's the other one I was thinking of.
And there was an attack like this in New York City not that long ago.
That's right.
So this has become almost a weapon of choice now for low-tech, lone wolf terrorists, if I could use that term, who are radicalized. But this is the first time that I'm hearing of this kind of an attack, a mass murder, similar to the kinds of mass shootings that you read and hear about from time to time using a van. So one wonders if this is a harbinger of things to come.
I certainly hope not, but at the same time, one of the big challenges with dealing with this is how do you defend against it? There's just, if we want to have a society where we can walk down the streets feeling a certain amount of safety, then, or with a certain amount of freedom and liberty, then there are certain risks. Now, this is a tragedy, no question about it. And I'm trying to remove the emotion because there's all kinds of them. There's outrage, there's sadness, there's empathy for the families. All these things are boiling away inside. But if you try to set that aside and look at it from a cold, calculating, what do we do about this? I'm not sure I have an answer. The only thing I might suggest is that if you look at the state of Israel as an example, they don't have these kinds of things happening anymore. They have in the past. But what is it that they do that we're not doing to filter out or try to keep a check on this? And I don't know what it is, but I'm saying that wouldn't it be smart for Canadians and Americans to go to the state authorities in Israel and see what are your internal security arrangements to prevent these kinds of things?
Right. Well, I think that we do already take some measures, not so much to prevent people from running people down with their motor vehicles, but loading up vehicles with explosives and driving them into buildings or into crowds has been a bit of a weapon of choice for terrorists as well. So once that became, I don't want to use the term standard operating procedure, but for certain terrorist groups, the world reacted by placing barriers in front of important buildings or buildings that could be characterized as potential targets of choice for terrorist organizations or terrorist attacks. So I think that we've done some of that. The Israelis, though, have been experiencing these kinds of random car rammings, driving into bus stops, etc., lately as well. They haven't figured out, I don't think, they themselves have not figured out yet how to prevent this from happening. And I think it's important, you mentioned it, we have an open society, and the reality is that you're going to have these kinds of attacks, and there are certain types of things that are just not things that you can actually defend against. But the starting point, Nick, really, I think, is in calling it what it is. Whether it's an act of terrorism or not, and whatever the motivation is, this isn't a tragedy. It's a crime. It's a horrific crime. And my understanding is that this person now has been charged with 10 counts of first-degree murder.
Right.
So I hear quite often when it comes to these kinds of things, mass shootings, terrorist attacks, etc., I hear the term tragedy attached to it, and certainly for the victims, it's tragic.
Yes.
But it's really at the very heart of what it is it's a crime. And I think that we have to recognize that that's what it is.
So it's different from, let's say, the Titanic sinking, which was a tragedy.
Right.
But this is an outward act of violence, and that's the distinction.
Right. I don't know that calling it that helps us to prevent it. In fact, it probably doesn't. But all the same, I think that I think it's important to really distinguish between this and what would otherwise be random acts of fate.
Well, like I said, I don't want to linger too long on this, but
one of the things that I find interesting about this is in the aftermath is this police officer that arrested the perpetrator, the driver of the van, is now being lauded as a hero. And I don't want to take anything away from this cop. He did his job. He did it well.
Very well, yeah.
But really, is he a hero? I mean, I don't know. I just found that to be very odd. And as I say, I don't want to take anything away from him, but, rushing into a burning building and saving 3 babies seems a little heroic to me. With this, I'm not entirely sure. And my understanding is, and I know you saw the video, I didn't, but my understanding is that when this fellow got out of the van, he pointed what appeared to be a pistol, a gun, at this police officer,
right?
And was shouting for him to kill him, etc. That is to say, for the cop to kill him. I think he was trying to commit suicide by cop is the term. And so certainly this officer, Constable Lamb, I think was his name, he certainly exhibited a certain amount of restraint, calmness in the situation by not shooting this guy who was pointing an object that appeared to be a gun. But my question is, what if it was a gun? I mean, the whole idea that he's a hero and used restraint is predicated on the idea that it could have been a gun, but he held back and he didn't overreact, or he didn't react to it being a gun. And, we're all giving him a pat on the back. And again, I emphasize one more time, I don't want to take anything away from him. I think he did his job. I think he did his job marvelously. But before we start calling the man a hero and awarding medals and orders of Canada and orders of Ontario, etc., shouldn't we just hit the pause button and ask ourselves, what if it had actually been a real gun and this fellow actually shot the constable and then shot a few other people? I mean, let's face it, he was capable of doing it. He's just killed 9 or 10 people with his van and injured a dozen or more others. So, it really begs the question, are our standards of heroism so low now that when somebody does their job and does it well, that makes them a hero? I don't know.
Well, let's contrast this with the attack on Parliament Hill, when the sergeant at arms took out the guy who shot Corporal Cirillo. Okay, here's the difference. For one thing, in the case that we're talking about now, I watched that video, and the guy made threatening moves. He pulled what looked like a pistol out from behind his back, pointed it at him. He was yelling at the cop. And if the cop had shot him, he would have been completely justified in doing so, because at the end of the day, that cop's got a family that he's got to go home to. He's got to protect the other people on the street, which, by the way, if you ever get a chance to see the video, watch the three people walking along behind them as if nothing's going on. They're just walking down the street like it's no big deal. There's a damaged van, a guy with a gun, a cop pointing at him and yelling at him, and these people walking on completely oblivious to what's going on around them. So there's that scenario, okay, and people are calling that heroic. And I'm tending to go along with your point, but let me demonstrate in a situation where, if you go back to the attack on Parliament Hill, when the sergeant at arms, whose name escapes me now,
Kevin Vickers.
Vickers, yes. When he went and grabbed his 9mm Glock out of his drawer, because he was a retired RCMP officer and was the only weapon on Parliament Hill that I know of, and went and did that combat role and shot the terrorist who was in the Parliament buildings, that was heroic, because the other guy was armed and was shooting back. That's the difference, is not only was he dealing with, a violent man, but this guy was intent on shooting everybody he could get his hands on. Mr. Vickers took the guy out and did it in a way that made sure nobody else got hurt.
Let's talk a little bit about Middle East politics. The United States is going to be moving its embassy to Jerusalem imminently. They're going to be converting their Jerusalem consulate into the official embassy while they go ahead and purchase a property and build a permanent embassy in Jerusalem. And I think that's just common sense. I love the fact that Donald Trump has essentially called Mahmoud Abbas, who's the president, quote unquote, of the Palestinian Authority, and his supporters, have essentially called their bluff. In other words, saying, we're just going to go ahead and do whatever we want to do, and you're no longer going to hold us hostage by saying, well, if you don't follow what we're saying, or if you go too far, or if you do things unilaterally, that's going to undermine the peace process. And of course, you have to ask yourself, what peace process in those circumstances? So I love the fact that Donald Trump has done this. This is not an anti-Palestinian thing that I'm saying here. I just think it's about time that a world leader, a president of the United States, actually stands up and says, enough is enough. We're just going to go ahead. We're not waiting on you anymore. We're going to start to create our own facts on the ground, so to speak. So I think that's a wonderful thing. And there are a couple of other countries that have agreed to do the same thing, or they're at least considering it. I believe El Salvador is one that mentioned.
El Salvador?
I know it sounds really strange. And I know that Romania is also considering doing it, and a couple of other countries. Isn't it about time that Canada does the same thing and not consider it? Let's make the move. Now, in fairness, Andrew Scheer, the leader of the Conservative Party, has said that if the Conservatives form the next government, they will move Canada's embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. I think that's great. But why do we have to wait for a Conservative government? Isn't this the right thing to do?
This particular prime minister has no interest. I can't tell you how much. There's nothing he's ever said. If you can point to me something he said that's been pro-Israel, never mind. I'm not saying he's anti-Israel, but just it never even comes up. He never talks about it. He has nothing to do with it. Doesn't want to go there. And for anybody to think that Justin Trudeau is going to wake up, take a smart pill in the morning because it's the only way his IQ would get above his shoe size. I'm being a little harsh, but screw it. I mean, the guy just isn't that bright. And he is not going to move the Canadian embassy from Tel Aviv to Israel, not for as long as his bum sits in the big chair.
Okay, so my question is why? Why not? Because this isn't just Justin Trudeau. This is a policy matter as well. And I don't know how many people are sitting down with Justin and saying, you have to move the embassy. He's being advised not to, and I'm just trying to figure out why it is that our politicians cannot just stand up and have the courage to just say, enough is enough is enough. We're tired of the process, the so-called peace process, being held hostage to your, what's the word I'm looking for? Your procrastination, your inability to make decisions. That's really what it comes down to. They edge closer, and then when the time comes to actually say, yes, we're going to do it, and I'm speaking here about the Palestinian representatives, they just can't do it. And then they expect the rest of the world to hold off. And, in fairness, I'm not going to blame them because it's a tactic or a strategy that's worked very well for them historically. But Donald Trump is proving that this is a strategy that's no longer going to work, at least insofar as the United States is concerned. And I just don't understand why Canadian politicians don't have that kind of courage and that kind of, not just courage, but insight into what's really happening in that part of the world.
Put yourself in the conservative benches, because it's not going to come from the liberal benches. They have so much to deal with. You've got Kinder Morgan. You've got all kinds of different issues out there they're dealing with on a daily basis with this government who they cannot get a straight answer from. Trudeau would rather chew broken razor blades than he would give a straight answer in the House of Commons. And if he can't not give a straight answer, he gets his little lackey, the young lady there, to stand up, parliamentary secretary to stand up and give the answer for him, even though he's sitting right there and they've asked him. And I think a lot of the times when these international things are going on, that it doesn't even broach their radar. Like if you were to go and ask Andrew Scheer today, why didn't you question Trudeau on, why we're not moving our embassy from Tel Aviv to Israel? I'll bet you he would say because he wouldn't answer me anyway. And we've got so many other domestic things on our plate that what's the point of bringing that up if we can't even get this stuff dealt with?
And speaking of Justin Trudeau,
well, we know what that sound means.
Yeah. Stupid politicians.
Yep. We got a prime one for you.
Okay. Nick, take it away.
Well, this one, a lot of people probably have already heard, but we just had to include it. This is Prime Minister Trudeau at a town hall, and a young lady is getting up and is asking him a question. And the question has to do with how maternal love will heal what's wrong with mankind. And the Prime Minister said, wait. We prefer to say...
Okay, hang on, no, don't say it. Don't say it. Let's play the clip.
Okay, go. Here it is.
Here it is.
Maternal love is the love that's going to change the future of mankind. So we'd like you to look
we like to say people kind, not necessarily mankind, because it's more inclusive.
There we go, exactly.
Oh, my God.
Yes, thank you.
We can all learn from each other.
Okay, well, I don't know what you're learning from me, Justin, but here's my lesson, okay? No, we, because you did say we all say people kind, we actually have never used the word people kind in our lives. So, maybe you have come up with the idea, but not we.
Yeah, I don't paint with too broad a brush there, Mr. Trudeau, because this we never uses that term. It's a stupid term. It's an invented term by you on the spot that nobody has ever heard before.
And why would he use people kind as opposed to humankind? I mean, we actually have a generic, gender neutral term, humankind, that lots of people use already. Hang on, I got to play this again. Let's listen to this again. Listen to it again.
Maternal love is the love that's going to change the future of mankind.
Hold it. what I don't understand is why he corrected her about mankind, but didn't correct her about maternal love.
Yeah, that's true. Which is the love of a mother.
That's right. I mean,
Yeah.
that is very gender specific.
Oh yeah, it's funny how he picked up on man but not woman.
That's it exactly. So here it is again.
So we'd
Hang
like
on.
you to.
We like to say people kind, not necessarily mankind, because
yeah.
it's more inclusive.
Yeah, not necessarily mankind.
Exactly. Yes, thank you.
We can all learn from each other.
Why not parental love? That's what I don't understand. What is it about maternal love that makes it special? I think he should have pointed out that we should have been talking about people love.
Because if he says parental love, that means parents are more important than the state is. And that would never happen with Justin Trudeau.
Of course, these days, what exactly is the parent or who exactly are the parents, right?
That's nothing but a nebulous cloud now.
Okay. Now, this got a lot of attention. I mean, literally, this got worldwide attention.
As it should have.
So, great, Justin Trudeau, you put Canada on the map again. You
Thanks.
and your socks. So,
Yes.
There you go.
This is why we call him a used sock salesman. The only job he's qualified for. Oh, man.
Okay. So that was stupid politicians for this
Trust
week.
me, we'll try to find somebody who isn't Justin Trudeau, but we can always fall back on him for next week.
And hey, listen, guys, send us if you have any kind of stories about stupid politicians or stupid political activities or anything like that. Send them to us. Comments at thecombatzone.ca. That's comments at thecombatzone.ca.
For those of you who don't know, in Ontario, we have the Progressive Conservative Party, who is the main opposition to the government at the moment, who is the Liberal Party of Ontario, run by Premier Kathleen Wynne. And the head of the Progressive Conservative Party was a man by the name of Patrick Brown. Now, Patrick Brown was doing things like hand-picking candidates and parachuting them into ridings over the objections of riding associations. Well, eventually, last January, Patrick Brown, for reasons outside that, there was some kind of sexual allegations that he did when he was a member of federal politics that forced him to resign. So we had to have a new leader appointed or go through the process of electing a new leader. The man who won that was Doug Ford. Now, Doug Ford, because of the mess that Patrick Brown had left him with riding associations in chaos. In one case, there was a whole riding association executive resigned en masse. I mean, it was a mess. So you don't clean that up overnight. And we're down to, 45 days between now and the election. So what Doug was forced to do, at least the way he explained it, he said, I have to appoint about 11 candidates because we don't have enough time to run the candidates through the vetting process in the traditional way that we all want. So I had no choice but to appoint some. And some people got upset and said, that's the same thing that Patrick Brown was doing. With the time constraints he's got, I don't think he had much choice.
Okay, so just to clarify, you're thinking or you're saying that Doug Ford appointing candidates at this late stage is the correct thing to do.
It's the only choice he had.
See, I thought when we were talking about this earlier that you were not in favor of it.
I'm not, but I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt once.
Okay. See, I was all prepared to give the exact argument that you just gave. So you took the wind right out of my sails on this
sorry
one.
about that.
The interesting question is going to be, if the Conservatives get elected, are they going to actually govern as Conservatives? And, for people like us, people like myself, the jury is out. We are obviously excited about getting rid of the current Liberal government. But I've been around this business, the political business, as you know, Nick, for some time. And one of the great disappointments for me is working hard to get a conservative or a nominally conservative government or conservative politicians elected, only to have them, bolt once the election is over and say, okay, well, we ran as conservatives, we got elected as conservatives, but we now have to govern as liberals. Anyway, the fact is that Doug Ford looks like he's going to be the next Premier of Ontario, so we're going to see what's going to happen.
I want to talk a little bit about this Attorney General's, Auditor General's report. It's historic. Basically, in a nutshell, she's saying you can't trust the government's books. They're not representing fairly the accounts of the province of Ontario. I don't know how many people are going to realize how big a deal that is. If there's any more damning thing you can say about a government, is that they're lying to you about the number one thing they're responsible for, your tax dollars. I was listening to terrestrial radio, and one of the commentators was saying he's afraid that the average voter isn't going to be paying any attention, won't care one way or the other, and it'll go right over their heads.
Well, this is an ongoing problem. And it's not just in Ontario, and it's not just in Canada. We have things so easy in this part of the world. Perhaps it's a little bit of an illusion.
Yeah.
Because we're living on borrowed money. And, this is something that it just astonishes me, Nick, that here in the year 2018, we're having to have this debate once more. I thought that we had settled this in the 1980s when political leaders like Ronald Reagan, like Margaret Thatcher, demonstrated the importance of governments borrowing less money, or perhaps not borrowing money at all if it's at all possible, having balanced budgets. Okay, so our time is starting to run out. We've tried to keep these podcasts in about the 30-minute range, so we've gone over sometimes, and sometimes we've been a little bit less. But we have some important news that we want to pass on before we shut this down. And that is that our podcast, the Combat Zone podcast, is going to be going live in the next few weeks.
This is kind of what we've been working on and working towards for a long time. When I was doing the show by myself, I loved it. There's no doubt about it. But to have somebody that, as a co-host, that you can bounce stuff off and have a engaging conversation with, and then invite phone calls, because we'll be able to take phone calls during the show. We'll have a website up. We'll have connections with Facebook. We'll have as many different ways for you guys to participate in the show as humanly possible. So we're going to do that. And so Joseph and I will be doing the Combat Zone live starting, what's the date? May
16th.
May 16th, that's it.
Yeah, May 16th, which is a Wednesday, and it's going to be Wednesday nights.
9 to 11.
9 to 11 Eastern time.
Eastern, yes.
And when we were trying to figure out what the optimum time was, we chose 9 to 11 so that we get to catch some of you guys out on the West Coast when you've come home from work.
That's right. We want to get as many people plugged in and listening as possible.
Yeah, we want to get you lefties out there in Vancouver Island calling us and calling up and telling Nick that he's not to... I'm trying to think of the right words.
Up with Kinder Morgan. Yeah, that'll be fun.
Hey, we've done a couple of these now since that whole pipeline thing, and we haven't even talked about it. I don't know if that's such a good thing. We need to get more current.
We will, trust me. When you only have 30 minutes, it's hard to squeeze that much stuff in.
Maybe we should be doing an hour. We don't want people to get bored, though.
No, I think the 30-minute segment's fine. We'll get to Kinder Morgan, because if you think that story's over, it hasn't even really gotten started yet.
Okay, so May 16th.
Yes.
That's a Wednesday. And then after that, it's going to be Wednesday nights from 9 until 11 Eastern time. So pay attention to the different time zones. And also email us your comments. Our email address is comments@thecombatzone.ca. That's comments@thecombatzone.ca. Okay, so we've had some interesting talk today, Nick, but I think we should hold off on our laundry list until next time.
All right. Thanks for you all for listening, and we'll see you all again in the Combat Zone.